Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. If everybody, for the ones that are new to the show, welcome. As always, as you're in chat, respect the mods, respect families, respect each other. And after the presentation, we'll be answering questions and things. And if you have any questions, most certainly ask them, and we'll see if we can do the best we can to address those issues. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at that I learned from the trial that I've been covering, and along with Chris at Mob Crew, we did some deep dives and in-depth analysis of some of the crime scenes for the Murdoch homicides trial. And I saw some interesting aspects of how law enforcement processes crime scenes and the understanding from the true crime world and the web sleuths out there of how they look at the same evidence and the way they may understand certain things and the way law enforcement understands them. And so looking back at Kohberger and with the Idaho 4 and those homicides that we're going to be looking at tonight, I've decided that with this tracking of the offender, that we're going to look a lot at the evidence in a certain manner so that you'll be prepared that when this trial starts and it gets to a certain point of the trial, that hopefully you'll have a better understanding of some of the things that will be presented in court. But before we get more into the show, I'll bring this up. Go ahead and all right. If you have any information about this case, absolutely make sure that you have contact with your local authorities, and so that justice can be found for Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zana. They deserve all the justice in the world. Them and their families, for the fact that they are the victims, innocent victims of a crime that they never expected, and that community never expected it would occur. And it brings certain elements of the dangers of our society and the world of the internet and how easily certain things can happen, but it also shows the value of technologies. Because through these technologies, of course, we're talking about not only what was part of that search warrant, about the tracks of the shoe prints that was within the home. Because when we talk about that shoe print and we're talking about tracking this offender, it's more than that, but because there's different tracks that were made by this offender in that residence. Of course, we're going to be looking a lot at the shoe print, but also remember that there's many definitions to tracking an offender, because we have everything from the digital footprints that he had, the Wi-Fi connections, the cell phone abilities of tracking this offender. And a lot of that is and could occur outside the home. And so it may be able to be explained away of being in the area, passing by the home, walking by the home, walking around the home, parking near the home. And so a lot of the digital and the cellular and the Wi-Fi connections, they may be able to be explained away by the prosecution or the defense, but it'd be brought in by the prosecution to show that he was in the area and there was constant contacts during certain periods, and to show that he did frequent that area. Whereas the defense is going to be given a totally new aspect and a different view of why he would have been in that area and what the possibilities are. And that will not be the same for the shoe prints. The shoe print is something that was recovered from inside that residence. And we're going to be looking at the shoe print mostly tonight, but we're going to be covering some other and setting up for our next show that we're going to be having. I've done some more testing so that I can demonstrate and show you that the different blood pattern analysis of different types of patterns that you can see at a scene such as what would have occurred there. Anytime you have this type of injuries and you have blood loss and you have cast off, transfers, passive blood pools, there's going to be the possibility, the high probability that there's going to be a lot of different types of analysis of the patterns that can be done inside that scene that not only may um, belong to the offender, but you'll have most certainly the some of the patterns and um, the analysis of the capabilities of identifying certain things from that scene, from the victim's loss of body fluids and blood, and I want to be able to share some of that information so that you'll understand that when you're looking at that scene in a whole, that yes, there can be all different types of transfers inside that environment. And law enforcement looks at them. We've had training to break them down to certain characteristics and identify different patterns. And it's not just that there's blood everywhere. It's more of that we're looking for certain things in those patterns that tells us a story. And through that story, it absolutely gives us certain information not only about the offender, but what was happening during the timeline. Because when you look at these patterns, they're not just static. They're from one room to another. The uh, uh, mode of transportation of walking through this type of scene allows for a lot of transfer of evidence, and there's you know with blood, which I was using synthetic blood, but still it has characteristics that are very similar to blood. And I was let down on the amido black. We'll get into that when we talked about how I analyzed and recreated some of the pattern analysis and trying to enhance some of the tracks that I created for this presentation. Um, when we were receiving our original training and handling um, um, and working with real blood from animals. We didn't have uh, the it was not invented at the time, the synthetic blood that we can now obtain, and I was unaware of how certain chemicals would react with synthetic blood. I know how it reacts with real blood because that's what we were trained on with these many different types of ways of identifying and working with and enhancing these blood patterns. And so with the synthetic blood, I ordered the amido black, and I was hoping it would create the exact same um, um, reactions as it would with real blood. That's not the case. I will be working on trying to create um, uh, some protein enriched synthetic blood. I'm going to see if there's some type of mixture I can come up with that will give it um, uh, the same ability to react as what real blood does. Don't know if I can, but we're going to try and do some experiments on that. But anyway, the blood pattern, if this is, we covered it the other day of setting out these uh, pallets of cardboard and poster board. And I set this long runway out and had Mrs. Steve walk this runway down the middle. It goes about, I think it was 64 feet or so totally. No, I'm sorry, 46 feet. I put that backwards. 46 feet from end to end. And Mrs. Steve walked all the way to the end, turned to the right, came all the way back down on the left, on the left-hand side, and then circled back around following these arrows. So she traveled this pathway 3 times. And for the fact that from the search warrant information, the probable cause affidavit, they state in there that the surviving witness observed the offender walk past her room, and outside that room, they were able to obtain a footprint that was from one of the test patterns of a preliminary presumptive test that showed that it was a footprint that was left in blood. And so, which brought up how long and how far can someone that steps into some type of blood stain, how far can they transfer it? And that's why I set this up. I set it up in the most um, uh, revealing possibility of how long you could track it against a contrasting um, material, such as this poster board. And as you can see from the passive pool here, when you start off, it absolutely is, um, uh, the tracks are just mottled full of blood, and you really can't tell much about the design within. But as you move down that path, you can tell a lot of things. And then there, even within this first few footprints, you can see that there's additional types of patterns in there. You have some cast off, you have some splashing, and things occur, which all tells a story. And we'll be covering more of that as we go in our next show when I break down all these different types of, of patterns within a patterns of blood. And as you walk along, you can see that the footprints are less bloody on the transfers, and you get all the way down towards the end. But here, around the 24-foot mark, there was something that occurred that I was looking for. Of course, you can see where the 24-foot mark is. You have this one shoe, and just above it, of course, you can't see anything. And until you go and you enhance this area with luminol. And when I did that, you can see the 24-foot mark, and you can see that by the time Mrs. Steve loops around and comes back past at the 116-foot mark, you can't see that shoe by the natural lighting in your eye. You can just see hints of just some type of markings over there. But when you turn off the lights and you hit it with luminol, and I'm, of all the presumptive and tests out there, I'm really big in luminol for this reason. It does have the abilities that you can filter it with the computer programs, and you can make those footprints absolutely pop, and which that's what you're able to do. Before and when we used it way back when, and we didn't have the computer filtering systems and things, it was a little bit harder. And luminol did have the abilities in my world at that time to be able to be seen as clearly as now, because by the time I'll filter these through, enhance them 2 or 3 generations later, this is what you get to. Even with the naked eye, it's not something that you can easily see because your eye is not as when you're working in total darkness, there's always some type of side light from the camera or from your whatever type of artificial lighting you're using so that you can work in this dark room, that your eyes don't adjust quickly. And so you can't see the true value of how bright that um, uh, very luminous um, print is. But by the time you wash it through the computer systems, you can make it pop. And even at the 24-foot one, that you can see that while on the left you can see some patterns of it, but when you look at the 24-foot, the way it's enhanced to the right, it's absolutely phenomenal. And also with the other chemicals that I had ordered to do this test to replicate what was done in Idaho, I was hoping that synthetic blood would have the same reaction. It does not. Later on, we'll get into that in a few minutes, and you'll see that while it did create some staining, and it is pretty clear, it did not have the effect that it would have had with real blood. And so I was disappointed in that, but that's part of doing this and learning some of the processes of working with the synthetic blood. and there will be shortfalls sometimes, but I know how to correct it. If I have to go out and get some government approved real blood, that's what we'll do. But as you go along the path, you can see where Mrs. Steve walked, all the way down here to the 40 foot. And then you can see that there's a little bit of a difference of the um, when you go in and just with natural lighting and using some of the filters, even without luminol, you can see that you can make the footprint, especially the one that says that's pointing from 40 to 40 there. You can enhance it a little bit better just with the computer filters, which is great. And it's better than nothing. But then when you hit it with a luminol, you can see how well, because virtually at the 132 foot uh, uh, loop around that Mrs. Steve did, you are not able to really see any type of shoe print at all until you hit it with that luminol. And which um, in our test doesn't mean a lot, but at crime scenes, this is huge for the fact that it shows that those shoes, they're like an inkwell, they're like a sponge. They still have, we're talking getting on out there 40, 50 yards of distance. And there's still a lot of uh, stain, blood stain on the bottom of those shoes. And that blood contains DNA. And so, is it still going to be there after he leaves? Because getting out of the home from where his last footprint was found, which was probably only 25 or 30 feet from where Ethan and Xana homicides occurred. So we still got when he left that home, that for another 100 feet, some type of and so there, it shows the potential of the DNA be there, possibly that will be realized when the CSI gets into that vehicle and starts taking it apart. More blue out. It comes out in this blue um, type of dye, but when it hits black, hits
audio issue.
Uh-oh. Is it coming back?
Should be.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll come back, guys. I don't know if it continues on. Just let us know. And
okay, you're good.
Okay. Hate it. Sometimes this time of days it does that. But anyway, the middle black with the lack of reaction with the synthetic is that the synthetic blood doesn't have the proteins and things, but it did enhance the pattern pretty well. But normally it would be a very contrasting, and it turns to black. It's a strong reaction. Works relatively well, but it didn't on this, and I hate that. So I'm gonna have to work on that chemical, or I'm gonna have to go out and actually get some different types of, of chemicals, or get real blood. And but it did highlight the soul characteristics, which I took this picture so that you could see even at 46 feet, which is better than. I see. I don't have the natural footprint for whatever reason. And also, um, these luminol prints are from another case that some of my older followers will remember. This is from the Delphi homicides of the recreations of the clothing that possibly will be brought up in the Richard Allen case as he goes towards the homicides trial for Libby and Abby. And so you can see that with even on cloth, you can get great detail. You, of course, right here, you may not be able to get ridge detail, but you can tell the size of that hand. So you can tell by individual if he fits within that characteristic and those parameters of his hand size, or if he would not. And because anytime you have a violent encounter, such as we had with in Idaho, that those victims during those four, uh-oh, something popped, during those four encounters and those fights for survival, there's going to be a lot of different types of transfers and a lot of different possibilities of identifying characteristics, whether it be a finger that or a hand or some part that they may have touched of a person, a wall, a light switch that may have some type of fingerprint on it, palm print, or identify the weapon. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can use these presumptive tests, and you can use luminol that the human eye won't pick up, but it will pick up when you enhance it and you use these chemicals. And then also, I brought in from the Richard Allen some of the testing I did for it, that not only on the soles of your shoes do you have the ability of transferring um, blood and DNA. You can get it from, from blood droplets, cast off, and just like on these boots, this also occurs on clothing. And so no matter what he wore during this offense and during his time and during these struggles and those attacks, the possibility that there was blood transfer is huge. And absolutely, I believe it's there. And so for every surface that he has, that when he takes from the crime scene and enters into his vehicle, enters into his home or wherever, even before he has a chance to clean up, he's still going to have some type of interactions with seat belts, his vehicle, steering wheels, radios, cell phones. And so the potential of taking something from that crime scene and introducing it into something of his personal environment is huge. And of course, hopefully he left things at the crime scene. We know he left his DNA on the sheath, and hopefully he left his DNA in other parts of the residence during those assaults, either by one of the victims fighting, able to obtain either some type of skin, hair, whatever type of DNA profile that they might possibly get from some type of violent struggle. Hopefully, one of the victims was able to injure him, so that DNA profile will be there. And but yes, not only on the soles of the boot, because the blood stains that's on the outer parts of his clothing, on top of his shoes, that's going to last a long time. And so the potential of getting it onto a brake pedal, gas pedal, floor mat, edges of the carpet within the vehicle, stepping in and out of the vehicle, the seat belt, steering wheel, like I said, is huge. And while I was testing with baby Steve's shoes that Mrs. Steve was wearing, I sent them back, and I really didn't treat the bottom of them with the chemicals for the fact I didn't want to expose um, the rest of the family and the grandson to some of these chemicals. So I went back and just pulled my work boots out, and we have the pictures from the previous testing, so that you see what, even after wearing these boots for days and weeks, there's still, you can see on the left hand side that it doesn't appear that there's any type of staining. But on the right, you can see obviously the luminol lights up, and that would be the same for those shoes if they can find them. And if they ever do find them, it will be there. And which, like I said, the potential for that of having his DNA on the inside of the shoes from wearing those shoes to having the DNA from one of the victims on the bottom of the shoe, there's no way other than having it squash that DNA won't tell, those two DNAs being in a shoe won't tell a story and wouldn't convince a juror of this offender's guilt. And then, of course, we have the, like I said, from my previous test of looking at the hard surfaces. This is just a piece of PVC pipe that I used and did some transfers, such as hand grips, to show how someone that is touching certain parts of their body or shirts or anything that has any type of blood on it, that you transfer it quite easily to these other surfaces. And I just wanted to show you so that even if he had cleaned up but he still had that piece of shirt on or something, and he touched his chest or his arm, reached back up and touches the steering wheel, adjust the radio, change gears, all these surfaces have great potential, from the seat belt to the seatbelt latch, of having this DNA transfer. And so I think it's going to go a long way, and I can't wait to see what CSI and when the courts come out, how important it'll be. And like I said, when we proceed in the next show, we'll be looking at different types of, in just regular light, of different types of blood stain patterns, from blood drops to cast off to shoe prints, handprints, fingerprints, and how law enforcement, CSI, looks at that, interprets it. And so as we prepare for the Kohberger to go to trial, so that we'll have a little bit better understanding. All right. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Let's see here. 826 Jennifer. Okay. All right. We are going to start off with Phil Hamilton.
Appreciate your
member.
Thank you. We appreciate your support. It means a lot to us. It helps us do a lot of things.
All right. And Walkie Talkie.
Hey, Walkie Talkie, $5 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Joanne Jackson.
Love Mr. and Mrs. Steve. You're the best. Sorry, it's not my. No, all of that, like I said, we're about to go to Texas, and hopefully just a couple, 3 weeks. I actually, on that, I sent a text message to the property owners today, and I've got to call them tomorrow and see if we can't finalize that date, and so that we can go out there, and that means a lot to us. Thank you.
All right. And Too Much Mom. Will the prosecution need to actually find the shoes to prove the shoe print belonged to him? There were 9 people inside the house when the police got to the scene. How can they prove they are his?
Well, hopefully when they were processing his residence, that they may have looked at attempting to find if they could find a similar type of shoe pattern in his home, on the bathroom tiles or on the kitchen tiles, or in also off the floor mats of his vehicle, brake pedals, gas pedal, stepping in on any part of any surface in his vehicles that might have that transfer done in blood. And so there's a lot of different ways that they may be able to prove that there's a similar shoe pattern that he owns. And even if it's a similar shoe pattern that might not be in blood, but was left pre-crime, say that he was at his house and walking across the floor, and he has these Van shoes, same size, characteristics, or whatever, it may have some type of identifying mark if they get lucky. That if they can just identify that he does own the same type, model, of shoe, then that can be huge. But yes, it would be a lot better if they could find those shoes, his clothing, the knife, and absolutely, that would be great evidence, and hopefully they will. But right now, I'm unaware that they do possess such.
Okay. And I've had questions about my hand. I am free of the splint. Thank you, thank you, thank you for asking. All right, and let's see here. And Kelly Parker, did I miss them recovering vans from the warrants?
No, they never mention them. They only mention that type of shoe pattern. Let's see. I can go back up here to it, and let's see here. It says the detected shoe print showed a diamond-shaped pattern similar to the pattern of a Vans type shoe sole. Doesn't mean it's Vans, but it's similar to a Vans type shoe sole, just outside the door of the bedroom located on the second floor. and that's consistent with a statement regarding the suspect's path of travel. And one of the things that we have to look at, if I believe law enforcement will have checked, like in the last question, about all the other people that were in and out of that house that possibly could have made that footprint. There was a presumptive test made showing that it was from a blood stain, and that it was a transfer of a blood stain. And so they would have checked against all the witnesses of who was in that house, checked their shoes they were wearing, and if it had matched any of the other people, they wouldn't have included it in the probable cause affidavit. So that stands, or to me, of reading the probable cause affidavit, that they're linking it to the offender. And so it tells a story, even in those key words.
Okay. And Shelley Schoenfield.
Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for your donation. Appreciate your support.
Right. And Single Mama 4. How do you rule out everyone else's footprints?
Well, of course, you have to interview everyone and say, where were you at during the crime? Where did you walk, and what parts of the house did you enter? And then they'll go back and look at their shoes, photograph their shoes, send them to the lab, seize them, and check them against other evidence. And that's how you rule them out. Because if it's a bloody transfer, then of course it means that you had to be there after the homicides occurred to be able to step in any type of blood transfer, or passive blood, or cast off, or whatever type of stain that you stepped in, and for you to be able to track it. And they would look at those areas and eliminate you. And that's how you rule out each and every one of them from the other people that lived in the home that were there after the crimes were committed. And then if you do find someone's footprint that says, oh, I was never in that house, and you find that shoe print, then we have questions to be answered.
And walkie-talkie, would the blood print last longer on a vinyl floor? I was thinking maybe poster board was more absorbent. Just curious.
I think they found this on the second processing, as you can see in this statement here, that during the processing, the investigators found a latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene. And on vinyl or not, once blood dries, as everyone knows, it's pretty hardy. That, when it's wet, it's easily smeared and it can be damaged. But once it dries, it's like ink. It's there. And so it's not that it gets absorbed. It gets transferred. It's like a latent, it's exactly what it is. It's just like a fingerprint using fingerprint ink, that the blood becomes that protein transfer, and it's extremely hardy. That, like I said, the people that have ever tried to clean up in your own residence, you know how tough it is to get a stain up sometimes.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Mrs. Steve knows extremely well.
All right, you ready for me?
Sure.
Okay. And Janae. I love that.
Funding for government approved blood. Keep up the great work. Yes. Yes, like I said, we used from the animal kingdom, we use all different kinds. And some back in the older days, we bought it by the gallons. And now they still do, to make sure that you work and you understand what real blood, how it reacts.
All right. And Corsica, no local farm to table animal blood in your area?
Well, I was hoping that I wouldn't. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do that. But I see that with some of this as we move forward into the testing and we bring it, and I want to make sure that my community understands all the chemical reactions. I was hoping I wouldn't have to go that route because, like I say, when you work with um, real blood, there is a shelf life. It's not like the synthetic. I can leave at room temperature forever. But with real blood, you only have a limited number of hours. And then you have the flies and different things in certain times of year that it's not the cleanest environment because there's transfer constantly.
Okay.
And it stinks. Real blood stinks.
Thanks for that. Okay. And catatonics, do you believe that this is Brian's footprint? I'm not 100% sure it belongs to him.
I tend to believe that it. I would give it over 90% probability. I give it that it does belong to him or to the offender. If and everything, of course, is indicating that he is the offender. They've charged him with it. They put it in the probable cause affidavit against him, and they wouldn't have done that without strong evidence of that. Now, do they have photographs of him wearing Vans shoes? Do they have uh, other evidence of that? Or purchases of that type of shoe? Very possible, because now almost everything that you buy, even a family member or you as an individual buying clothes, there's a purchase history out there somewhere, and hopefully that's the case and they have it. Um, but I, while anything, I'm like you, I don't believe 100% in most anything, but I will give it a high probability of 90+%.
And Joanne Jackson, could you use animal blood?
Yes, and that's what we originally trained with to become with our expert training back in the day. Like I said, that was back before they had created this synthetic blood, and which I'm extremely happy it's out there because it makes the working with the luminol extremely easy and less hazardous.
To my washing machine.
Well, yes, to our washing machine.
Okay. And walkie talkie, do they collect vans in evidence?
Not that I know of. And what shoes or boots they recovered, I don't know what sole pattern they had because it says here similar to the pattern. Doesn't say they're Vans, but it says similar to the pattern.
And Molly at True Crime Web, do shoes with different types of soles like rubber, leather, etc., make a difference in leaving more or less traces? Thinking a leather sole would absorb more.
And like I said, when we look at these, uh, when they first start, regardless of any type of whatever the sole's made of, and when you look at your shoes, you can see inside of the different types of soles or how deep the treads are, and the and some of your leather soled shoes they are almost slick, and so there's not a lot of crevices and wells that blood can stay in and set there but and gives the ability that it will, due to gravity and movement, move out of those crevices down and rejuvenate the transfer as it would if you had a deep soled shoe. And so I would think that a leather slick shoe would be less transferring as long. But it's an interesting question, and that is another test that I'm gonna have to get Mrs. Steve
for another day.
We're gonna
Thanks,
use
Molly.
we're gonna use some of Mrs. Steve's slick leather shoes.
Oh, nice.
Thank
I'll be
you.
walking around town with luminol glowing in the dark. Awesome. All right. And Kelly Parker, thoughts on house demo before there's even a plea?
I hope that's not the case, and hopefully the courts, will not allow that.
Okay.
I know it was up that they were talking about it. I hope nothing's happened to the house since then.
All right. And SSS at True Crime Web, egg whites have protein and a blood-like consistency.
And that's some of the things I was thinking about that I'm trying to cook up, trying to introduce that into some of my synthetics. And but yes, we think alike because I was talking to Mrs. Steve earlier about uh, how I could cook up something that might work, and that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at.
And Mama Styles, Mr. Steve, do you think that releasing the house to clean too early will cause issues for the prosecution?
Um, they took, of course, they would have took all the bedding materials um, and whatever transfers, if there's carpet fibers and um, um, any area that they can identify that there's something of value as far as transfers. Anything that will accept DNA profiles or anything identifiable as evidence, they will have seized. Um, and But that still doesn't mean that there's not something within that house that they've missed on some surface, and that's the value of not allowing some processes to occur. It's not always possible, and the cleaning processes can damage, such as we saw in the Murdoch trials, that the family was cleaning up within 24, 48 hours after the homicides. And so once you have that occurring, yes, there can be evidence that's destroyed.
And everybody says I need to go shoe shopping after you do your test. All right. And for Molly, does the Red Cross or plasma centers have blood that they can't use for some reason that they can donate to you?
I really would not want to use, there's more risk in using human blood versus uh, different
Unless it's
species.
your own, right?
Yes, unless it's your own, um, for the fact that the transfer of certain types of diseases and things that from one species to another. There's certain safeguards in using, like we used to use um, equine, or there's so many different types of animals, but it's better to use them than the other human. It's a good idea, but like I said, there is certain dangers in that.
They crack me up.
They're supporting you against me.
Yeah, pretty much. Molly's got me a good birthday list: washer, dryer, chef's knife, shoes, possible new car if interior was secretly luminol. What are you doing?
You break one knife and they
See?
never hear the end of it.
Thanks, Molly. I appreciate that. You got my back, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And here's the handle part of it. I still got it. I may fix it for her birthday.
No, gee, thanks. All right, let's see here. All right, that one's gone. And John Shepard, wouldn't it still be better to use real blood as it dries differently and
Coagulates.
coagulates?
Yeah, as far as the training and what we took, yes. But no, the some of the synthetic blood, and they have different types of synthetic blood. They have some blood that reacts with certain chemicals, just like blood, and then they have some cast off blood, fake blood that you can use. But and of course, yes, and that's how come we trained with real animal blood, because all the animal bloods are similar and they do exactly as you say. Blood dries a little bit different than some of the synthetics, although it does react with the chemicals, and it's supposed to be very close to the same viscosities and a lot of the elements. But but yes, you're right that there is, from my observations, the way it coagulates and dries is a little bit different, and I will be at some point going out there, because as blood coagulates, there is a certain time period, whereas you can leave what they call plastic prints in blood, whereas you'll leave the ridge details at a certain point, and which is, but that means that the offender has to be there quite a while. And if you have a situation where you do have an offender that spent hours inside of a crime scene, that would be something that you would be looking for.
Okay, and that's all I have starred. So let me jump back up here. And Anne, yes, I am free of the splint. Thank you for asking. Thank you, goodness. All right, let's see here what we got. Okay. We talked about the eggs.
I'm even going to try protein powder. Like I said, I want to, if I can use it and get something that is consistent with the reaction of proteins, that's what I would rather use than the real stuff. Just safer.
Let's see here. And yes, you have answered all your questions.
I've got all my questions answered. Well, guys, it's
if anybody's got one, pop it in there real quick.
Absolutely. But like I said, the night show was mostly a part 2 of what we talked about the other day, and I hate that the chemicals, because I wanted to show you what was represented by the search warrant when they said that they did a presumptive test, found it would be blood, and then they enhanced it with the amido black.
Bless her heart, Monique. May I ask if you please give a recap? I was shoveling snow and missed the beginning. If anybody deserves a recap, it's the one shoveling snow.
Absolutely.
I would.
Basically, what we the recap of the whole thing we were talking about tonight, that tracking the offender is simply that there's a lot of different ways that you can use the word tracking offender, from digital footprints, cellular devices, all the way into the Wi-Fi connections in the courts. But we were looking literally at the footprints that he would have left, for the fact that they recovered this footprint outside as the offender left the residence and was witnessed by one of the surviving resident members that walked past the door. And so they found this shoe print. And I wanted to see how long you could track this shoe print, not only through the residence, but for the potential that it would carry on into his environment, such as the vehicle that he left in, and how much would the transfer allow. And so that was the importance of this test that I conducted, this control, so that because if we can find in his vehicle or in his residence any DNA profile that he took from those 4 violent encounters as he committed those homicides, then it's important for the case, because he can explain away a lot of the digital and technology footprints by just being in the area, but he cannot explain away his DNA or the DNA profile from any of the victims in his home environment or in his vehicle. So that's what's going to be important. But I appreciate you being here.
Wait just a second. And from Mist, is there anything he could have used on carpet in his car that would not show up in a luminol test?
Well, there's certain chemicals that he could use as far as cleaning the carpet and floor mats that might react also with luminol. Reacts a little bit different, but it does have a reaction with. And hopefully they would be able that it didn't destroy all the DNA profile. And that they would recognize it for what it is. But everything that we've used to clean, Mrs. Steve has a great knowledge of how to remove blood stains, it all, on everything that we've retested, washed for numerous times, that when I go back in there, you can still see, and there's been studies done on the of how to clean clothing and other items to rid it of the blood stains and the DNA profile. And it's not as easy. You know, sometimes DNA is extremely fragile, sometimes it's not. And hopefully in this case, it's not.
All right, hold on. You've got another one here. And Mama Styles, here's a non-crime-ish question at True Crime Web. Do CSI have to get hepatitis shots because you work with bodily fluids?
We actually, our departments and the departments do offer them to us, not so much just because of CSI, but because of all the physical encounters that you'll have with individuals.
Needle sticks.
Yes, from needles to confrontations. There's a lot of different ways to get hepatitis, and
He got all sorts of shots.
yes, I got all sorts of shots, and but and you know, I wouldn't. You're usually dressed out early on before we went to the CSI world, and people enter crime scenes. They weren't as prepared or protected. Now you have booties, you have these Tyvek suits, you have face masks, you have facial protection, and so it's not as likely for you to be and gloves, a lot of gloves, and so it's not as likely to be exposed to it. But you know, I took the shots not so much for CSI, but for those situations where you would have encounters against people that might have it.
All right, one more.
Sure.
Josh the Posh. Can shoe prints lifted from bloody sources reveal just as detailed or unique features as mud or other sources?
Right here. Absolutely. If there's any type of defects in that, and it depends, you know, that somewhere along that trail and those transfers, you're going to have some shoes that have certain parts of the shoe that may have a characteristic such as some type of wear pattern damage. And I'm not a shoe expert in tread wear on tires, on shoes. I understand a little bit about it, but those experts are able to go in there and identify certain things with their training and ability to testify to that. So I believe in the science, and I think absolutely that if they have the ability to identify a certain characteristic, that I would believe in that science if it was presented in court.
Okay, hold on one second. You got a rash.
I got what?
You got a whole bunch coming in.
Okay.
Let's see here. Puppy. Oh, somebody has a new puppy. Awesome. All right, so let me have that one and go here. CJK, the one thing that so many has questioned, why did he not drop blood off his clothing on his way out? Had to be all over him. I doubt he took his outer layer of clothes off before leaving.
I agree with you. And the thing about certain types of clothing is blood fibers, it absorbs it. And actually, in some of the blood pattern of blood that drips off of, say, a hard surface such as a knife blade, is only limited. It only goes so far. And I'll demonstrate some of that. And actually, it's in some of these pictures that I'll be presenting to you. But generally, from that blood-stained knife and from the cast off of it, you're probably only going to see blood droplets by gravity a few 10 less than 15 feet in. The closer to that, when you start seeing some of these 90-degree blood droplets that are falling, that are showing up something that blood runoff and collecting, and then it develops into that almost nickel-sized blood droplet that you'll see on impact on the floors, that it only go a certain distance from the main source. But now if you start seeing a consistent pattern that's away from any blood source, and say it's 30, 40, 50 feet from where a victim is, then we start looking at that. These are the blood droplets of the offender because he has injured himself and he's having a constant supply of blood that is running off either a fingertip, a weapon, and allowing those blood droplets to form. So when we start finding, and that's one of the things that we're going to be covering in the next show. So I'll show you what those blood droplets look like at 90 degrees, and so that you'll understand those are the things that we look for that will absolutely identify an offender if we can find them.
All right. And from Debbie, so what are the cases you will be covering going forward? I know you and Chris will be working on some.
The two I've got to get before I go to the others, of course, is the Texas Abercrombie, and then we'll be going up and looking at Evansdale, Lyric, and Elizabeth. And those are the first two that we're going to go. And then there's a case or two that Chris is working on in the West, and those families, once they clear, that we talk about, and we will talk about those.
Okay. And Molly, any updates on searching for Amber Crumb Travels?
Yes, like I said, I text messages today trying to or talking to the owners of the properties that we're going to be going out there, and so that we can get the utilities out there to mark certain diggings and electrical lines, so that when we come in with our equipment, the ERI equipment, that we'll understand, and not that we're going to be digging, but we just don't want we won't understand any type of interference or anything that might affect the readings. And I'm going to be trying to call the families tomorrow to make sure that our April dates meets what the conflicts with the family that currently own the property, and so that we can get out there just as soon as possible.
And Mr. Steve, knowing BK's criminology studies, I'm wondering if he wasn't wearing shoe covers, then maybe he got hold of a pair of Vans for this one night and then destroyed them.
Yeah, if this shoe does belong to the offender, I doubt that would. It's possible, and that's something else I'll test. Is do tests with a shoe pattern that has booties on it versus the shoe pattern without booties, and so that I love it when our community brings up these questions, because it's something that we have to address and see if it would change or make it unidentifiable. But yes, are the shoes destroyed? It's possible, or if they kept as a trophy, possible. We just don't know yet.
And Debbie, I'm not sure about this one. When does Millet go to trial?
I don't either.
So email Steve,
Yes.
Steve at truecrimeweb.com, and he'll look into it.
I've got so many cases in my mind, I can't keep up with all of them.
All right. And Monique, question: have you heard of the DNA Bardol collection method? Did they use it in the Kohberger case?
I don't know what method they use. All the DNA technologies out there, and the new, no, I don't know which one that is. Sorry.
Okay. And John, would blood spray out in stabbing someone?
Well, it depends if you hit a artery or not, and what part of the body and what type of clothing and how exposed it is. But there's a lot of different ways for arterial spurts to occur, and we just don't know what injuries occurred at this. But it's a good question, and when you see arterial spurts, you know what they are. They're very distinctive, and they leave every time the heart pumps, they're easily identified.
And Debbie came back and said Larry Millet, Millette.
No, I don't. I can't place them. I'm sorry. I'll look it up. Larry.
Larry, Milettee.
Okay.
Okay. All right. You are done.
Well, guys, I appreciate y'all being here tonight, and I look forward to the emails and the comments. And we'll have this next show and looking at different parts of the blood pattern, so you'll understand what we see and what we look for in those. And we appreciate everybody's support for tonight, because as we get prepared to go to Texas, it means a lot to us. And I'll be giving you an update just as soon as I find out from the homeowners and the property owners if they're when their conflicts will be minimized, because we don't they still have to live in that home, live in that residence, and our scientists and the homeowners, they're the two most important ones that we have to get all the stars aligned so that we can go out there. And just bear with us, but we'll give you updates as soon as we know.
All right. Love y'all.
Y'all stay safe out there. See you
You're
soon.
the best.